What do you do when you come home and you go to turn into your driveway and you see worms all over the driveway? Well, my good husband noticed there were worms. We were just about to turn in, slammed on the brakes, and he's been picking up worms for the last 6 or 7 minutes and putting them into our beds. So that's what worm farmers do. The reason we have worms all over our driveways, look at the mulch in our beds. Our mulch is full of worms. We put worm castings on our flowers, on our beds, and we use good, healthy mulch. So it's full of worms, and he's even picking them up off our sidewalk that goes up to our front door to save them from being caught on the hard surface of the driveway when the rain eventually stops and the driveway dries out. And of course, these poor things don't have any directional beacon to tell them where is safe. And of course, the ones on the driveway, we would have just driven right over them. So what a good man. Oh, he's going to show us some worms. He's going to show us the worms that he's been picking up from the driveway. Look at them all. Oh my goodness. He's using one of our pine needles. Helps him pick them up really quickly. And he's out there getting soaking wet. All right, let's see what he's got. What have you got in your hand? Oh, look at them all. Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Those are all our Vancouver Island worm, Arctiostrotus Vancouverensis. Landon's putting them loose back in our mulch beds where they can live. So you know me, I'm a big pushover for worms getting lost in the rain. Look at them all. I clean them up from the rest of the driveway. I don't know if they'll all dump out of this Starbucks cup, but there they go. That's how many I found on our driveway. Just, what did it take me, Landon? About 15 minutes? Yeah. So I believe these are all Arctiostrotus Vancouverensis worms, our special Vancouver Island worms. They obviously are very susceptible to barometric pressure changes. So I've got them in a temporary bin, one of these bins I took out of Gilligan, and they'll be safe there. I mean, worms are fine in the rain. They're absolutely fine in water, but they're on the driveway, which obviously isn't safe. And secondly, as soon as this rain stops, they have no way to get back to the mulchy borders or the lawn where they will be safe. So worms don't drown. So do they surface just to find a mate? I wish we had these answers. It's been several hours, and these big bruisers are still hanging out on the top of this bin that I put them in. Don't know whether you can see them there with all the sticks and twigs, but there are so many worms still hanging out just on the top. Here's one here. Just cruising around the top. Oh, there's several there. These are Arctiostrotus Vancouverensis, and they are a type of composting worm that lives on the upper surfaces. And I've noted in some of my previous videos that they don't seem to be light adversive. This is ridiculous. Why are you guys still hanging out on the top? You go down, there's food down there, and there's moisture down there. That is crazy. Look at this guy coming out. Just hanging around. I don't know, putting a light on them overnight isn't going to help because they've had a light on them for the last few hours. There's another little guy over there. Everywhere I look, I see worms on the surface. And they're big. Hope we don't wake up in the morning to find these guys all over the floor. like they were all over my driveway just a few hours before. They were so visible for such a prolonged period of time that, I really watched to see whether, they were feeding. And I did see them move elements of the bedding with their mouths. I've heard that Canadian night crawlers can, grab a chunk of leaf or whatever and take it down into their burrows. And these guys are certainly big or bigger than Canadian night crawlers. And I did see one sort of, suction a piece of leaf to its mouth and move it around. Now, is that, just, feeding behavior, or is it, just the mucus on the body, just, a piece of leaf just stuck to it? I don't know, but it was with the mouth. I didn't catch it on video, but I didn't see any evidence that they were taking in or feeding on any of the softer elements of the vermicompost. Again, I didn't specifically point it out on a video, but when you look at the extended body, when they're just traversing across the bedding, I did see castings moving down their intestines. Those would have been, of course, from before when they were still out in our garden. I thought this little bundle here might contain some evidence of mating behaviors, but it turned out they were just like 2 ships passing in the night, or 3 ships passing in the night. I don't know how many are in this little tumble. This actually is the original location where I deposited them. And, this is, over 3 hours later, and they're still hanging around in the same location. For anyone watching who hasn't seen any of my earlier videos on these worm species, I will post some links to some of my earlier videos in the description. Just the short story is they came along with some manure that we got, some organic manure that we got. And, we had seen these huge worms in the manure. And, I originally thought, well, I can't keep them in my compost bins. These are obviously wild worms. And it turns out they're native to this little corner of the planet. And I kept, panicking every time I found one in a worm bin and hurriedly putting it back out into the garden. And then, of course, I would miss them. And, when I would be harvesting castings, I'd find this, 14, 18-inch worm in my castings. So they do live in my worm bins. It's impossible now to separate them from my red wigglers and now my European night crawlers. But, they seem to be just gentle giants. In every respect, they're more chill than a red wiggler. And for that, I'm grateful. Although, they do mystify me on, what their food preferences are, what their mating behaviors are like. This idea that they are surfacing during, a low pressure system and all over our driveway is not new. Although certainly today we have found, probably hundreds of them on the driveway. And that seems to be a little bit more extreme. So maybe it's the spring behavior that we note with some of our other worm species. And in the spring, worms tend to behave differently. I'm not sure. I'm just glad I was able to scoop these up and that Landon was able to prevent the van from driving over any of them on his way into the garage. There's scant information about this worm species online. But one of the reports that I saw was that hikers will find them sunning themselves on forest trails. So they live in the leaf litter of our beautiful British Columbia forests here on southern Vancouver Island. And, hikers will come along and sort of do a double take when they see this massive worm just lying on, on the pathway. So the fact that, I'm noting that they don't dive down in the presence of light doesn't seem to be unique to the worms that I have in my worm bins It's one of the few behaviors that is documented online. Oh, I guess there was another mention that they can jump. They're not a jumping worm, please don't mistake that, but that they can sort of flip themselves. And I've seen a red wiggler kind of flip itself. And, for a worm this big to flip, that would be quite a sight to see. But I haven't really noticed that extreme behavior. You can see that they're pretty relaxed. They can wiggle around in your hand just like any worm would do to try to get out of that situation. But they certainly don't behave like I've seen the videos of the true jumping worms. So as far as I know, I'm probably documenting this species as much as anyone else. And here they are. They're not aversive to light. If they were fleeing across my driveway because of the drop in pressure with the rainstorm, they have not made any attempt to escape. As you can see, a very shallow tote. They could easily go over the side. They're not running from this tote. And yet for some reason, hundreds of them were running across the driveway in that rainstorm. I wish some researchers would get on this and give us more information about this amazing species. But I guess, in a way, I'm kind of doing my own observational research, and that has relevance too. It all adds to our shared knowledge of the importance of worms to our ecosystem. I put this toilet roll holder into the bin to give you a size comparison of just how big some of these worms are. Of course, they ignored it. They didn't go tunneling underneath it for the shade. They just stayed right on top. But you can see how big they are when they decide to stretch out. And these are not the biggest specimens I have seen in our garden or even my worm bins. I really took advantage of this opportunity of having them up close and personal for such a prolonged period to examine the segments on the body, the clitellum, to try to see if I could see any cocoons that might be ready to shed. I actually did find a cocoon on the surface of the bin when I came back after about 4 hours that I do believe is from this species. Now, whether it was just deposited or it's from before, I don't know. I zoomed in on the part of the video where I first put the worms on this bedding, and I did not see the cocoon in that location. Don't know if the camera was just at the wrong angle, but I don't think they're breeding. I actually watched them for quite a long time, hoping I would catch 2 of them breeding on the surface, because that's something I have never witnessed in this species. But they cruised right by each other, even when they were similarly sized adult worms. They just cruised right by. They didn't seem to be interested in engaging in any breeding activity, which indicates to me that maybe this surface cruising behavior is a sign of stress. It's been another hour, and I fluffed up the bin in case these big guys wanted to have fluffier bedding to go down into. But they've, and I made sure they were all underneath the bedding, and they're starting to make their way back up to the top one by one. There's this big bruiser poking his head up saying, okay, she buried me. I'm coming back up to the top. Don't know why their instinct is to climb. It's still raining. Maybe that's got something to do with it, the barometric pressure. But whatever the case, these worms definitely have an instinct to surface during inclement weather. Like I said, I buried them all. And one by one by one by one, I'm seeing them come back up to the top. I've also seen them kind of do porpoise dives in and out of the material. So I know they have the ability to burrow through this. Why wouldn't they? This is their native bedding environment. Gilligan's vermicompost has a lot of chunky elements to it. It's mostly leaf litter as bedding. So this is what these worms have been munching away on for hundreds of thousands of years. So obviously I've put them in a new bin tonight, and, you know, leaving the light on, it's been on this whole time, may or may not be a deterrent. I will film briefly in the morning again to just let you know whether I'm going to find worm jerky on the floor. It may have been a big mistake for me to move these worms indoors out of their element. You know, leaving them outside, I thought, wow, they're just going to end up on my driveway and die that way. But now that I've brought them indoors and they're not settling, I'm sort of concerned that they're just going to end up on my floor overnight. I'll append a short video just after this one showing you what I find in the morning. Well, hello everyone. It's Sandra the next morning. Still with my croaky throat. No sign of escapees and no sign of any worms on the surface. I left the light on all night. So looks like we've settled them in. And it's still raining. So we still have the low pressure system. All right, thanks so much for hanging in as we discover more about these magnificent creatures here from southern Vancouver Island. Bye for now.